So, folks, it's time to take a look at some more custom Hearthstone cards made by all of you. And this time around, we're looking at some fun zero mana designs with, as you can see behind me, a really big impact on the game. I don't want your basic, zero mana 1/1 wisps. I wanted some big, crazy cards. And you all delivered. There's some nutty ones in this video. So before we get into things, I'd like to say this video is sponsored by Keeps, who we'll talk about a little bit more later on. But for now, let's take a look at the last stand here from DeSantis D. It's, of course, zero mana, a legendary spell for paladins. You only got one of these in your deck, and you'll restore 20 health to your hero. But, huge downside, in 2 turns, you're going to destroy your hero. So this is a last-ditch effort to try to win the game. If you don't win the game in those 2 turns, you're absolutely going to lose the game. So does that 20 health buy you enough time to return a board and maybe get a counter lethal, a counter pressure, enough time to set up a combo, for instance? So cards like this, obviously, it would be like incredibly risky to print. It could be nuts, right? It could just be this absurd enabler for a combo deck. I'll let you guys argue about balance, but I do love the idea of this like paladin heroically making one last stand, a heal from the gods to fight it out and see if they can turn the tides of battle before it's too late. So flavor on this one's really fun. Impact is huge, and I'll let you all argue about whether or not it's good or bad for the game. So next up here, we have Scourge Rat from Bahab the Warrior. This is a really fantastic, just super clean design, I think. 0 mana 1/3 beast. Death Rattle, give your opponent a coin. I mean, the art and effect here obviously line up amazingly. I don't know how you guys find these perfect fits, but you're getting a nice little boost on your stats here as a 0 mana 1/3. As we all know, a 1/3 coming down early in the game could be a really big deal. We saw Dire Mole in the past at 1 mana doing work in the meta. This is now 0 mana, but you do realize this downside. And the coin can be a pretty big downside because some opponents can ramp into bigger plays. They can utilize the coin for combo style effects, spell synergy stuff. So you're going to have to decide whether or not that's worth it to get a really nice, fast, aggressive board. I think this would often be worth it for aggro decks. It could arguably be too strong. We've seen some 0 mana 1/1s pop in for synergies in the past. And because this has that higher base health, things like setting up buffs and utilizing beast synergies in some cases could really go nuts on this one. So it's another risky one from a balance standpoint, but that's going to be the case in this video. 0 mana cards are hard to find the right line, but this is an absolute perfect fit for flavor and feel. I wouldn't be remotely surprised to see a card that looked exactly like this show up in Hearthstone. So next up here is the Unstable Wisp. We got a Wisp behind me, a Wisp in the card. What's going on? This one's from Kogeti. It's a 0 mana 1/1, like a Wisp, and while it's in your hand, it gains +1/+1 for every card that your opponent plays. So this could get really big rather quickly, right? If your opponent's playing one card on turn 1 and you're playing this, on the follow-up because you're on coin, this is a 0 mana 2/2, and that's already pretty amazing. If you wait a couple turns, it could be a 0 mana 5/5, 0 mana 7/7, right? But there's this crazy downside here where it has a corrupt that makes it cost 10. So you've got this card that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but as soon as you want to play another card, and if that card costs more, it's going to corrupt this one, and it's going to push it to 10 mana. So you got this kind of crazy risk-reward scenario where it's like, okay, I'm going to try to make this a 0 mana 6/6. I'm going to wait for them to play 5 cards. I can't really play any other cards unless they're 0 mana myself. So I'm just going to try to get by on hero powers until they play 5 cards. Then I'm going to swing it really hard with an Unstable Wisp, or maybe even 2 Unstable Wisps. I don't know why this is missing the rarity gem, but you assume non-legendary. And then, there is this other scenario where you don't care. You corrupt this and you just wait to play it until the late game because it might be a 10 mana 15/15. And that could still be decent for a deck that's looking to play into the late game. But I really like finding this balance. And again, could be totally OP, could actually be too weak potentially because it might just be too slow because the break point is like, man, I'm 5 cards behind for a 6/6. That's not necessarily a good trade-off depending on the power level of those cards. So another one where I'm curious to hear thoughts on whether or not this would be worth it, but I just love the idea of a corrupt that's bad instead of a corrupt that's good, and trying to work around that and fit it into your game plan. That's really cool. So with Unstable Wisp behind us, I'd like to talk about our sponsor for this video. It's Keeps. So if you don't know Keeps, they've been a long-time sponsor on the channel here, which means you guys have been showing them a ton of support, so thank you. And they're all about helping you keep your hair. And, you know, I want to have the biggest hair in the Hearthstone world, a goal I think I'm doing pretty good at. There might be some challengers out there, and thankfully Keeps can help. If you didn't know, 2 out of 3 guys will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. I'm creeping up on that number, and Keeps can help stop and slow down that loss of hair while you still have some left. And the cool thing is you can get treated from home. You don't have to go visit the doctor. They'll send the medication right to you, which for a nerd like me who's trapped inside playing Hearthstone all day, that's perfect. Remember, prevention is key. So if you're noticing that you're losing your hair, do something about it. For a limited time, you can go to keeps.com/Regis or click the link in the description below. I also put it down there in the pinned comment, and you'll get 50% off your first order. All right, shout out to Keeps for the sponsorship. Now back to business as usual. See what I did there? This is a 0-mana card from Badonkamunk, and it just reads, "Nothing happens." And I think this is such a brilliant design. It's for Mage and Rogue as a dual class card, both of which love having really cheap spells. And even if they do nothing, I think there are many instances of Rogue and Mage who would love this. So things like Cyclone Mage, just having an extra spell to turn this into something cool. Of course, Rogue with all the combo activators. If Edwin's still in your deck, this could be a big way to pump up Edwin. Maybe not as good as Preparation, but still, this is an extra little bonus. This could also be an interesting way to disrupt some things like dual class, generation style cards, or could even be really good with Keyword and Ivory. If you care about these, you could get a bunch of these in Spellburster very cheaply, guaranteed. So just a really neat flexible tool here to toss into either of these classes. And I love the idea that it's just literally nothing happens. I think it's so simple and elegant, but really, really fitting. All right, so moving on here to Honor Ceremony from Quackak over there on Reddit, it looks like. This is a 0-mana Shaman spell. It gives a minion +1/+1 for each time it has attacked this game. So a really cool kind of post-hoc buff here. Usually you want to buff stuff and then attack with it, and this goes the opposite direction, because if you just played this right away on a minion that hadn't attacked, of course you'd get nothing. So you want maybe like a Rush minion, and certainly Wind Fury minions seem to have some synergy, and anything that's like left behind on board for multiple turns could suddenly become a really sleepy threat on the back of Honor Ceremony. But cards that come to mind in particular are things like Batterhead. Any sort of card that has, multiple scaling attacks like that, we could see more in the future, would be nuts with a card like this one. Think about like Walking Fountain, for instance. Getting a little bit of an extra heal, keeping some survivability on the Walking Fountain could go a long way as well. So some really neat ideas here for how you could scale up Honor Ceremony. I don't know that this would be played in decks a lot necessarily, but off random generation, that in a pinch sort of solution sometimes could be really cool with a card like this one in the Shaman toolkit. Okay, moving on to Arcane Exchange from Rob K. It's a 0-mana mage spell that swaps all spells in your hand with random mage spells. So a way to kind of take a redo on your hand. And we've seen cards like this in the past, actually with like Lillian Voss for Rogue. The idea was maybe put a bunch of cheap garbage in your hand and then trade it into some better stuff or higher mana cost things, or just new things because the stuff you currently had wasn't really fitting the game state or the matchup. But this time, for 0 mana, it might actually make more sense than with a card like Lillian Voss. And in Mage, it might make more sense too, because Mage, I think, has way more big payoff spells, where if you take, a measly Arcane Missiles and you turn it into like a Power of Creation, you might be really happy if you're in a value matchup. Rogue, I don't think, has quite as much diversity and probably has more weak spells as well. So I think this could be a really neat way for Mage to shift their hands. Now, one notable thing about like this versus say like an Evocation, which is also a way to like fill your hand with random spells. This is swapping spells in your hand, so you kind of have to already have a lot to make it good. So on an empty hand, this isn't really going to do anything. Now, on that note, though, if you do play this with Evocation, which is what I'm building towards, you can swap all the Evocation spells into new spells and then keep them. So instead of evocation getting rid of all your spells, this could be a way to actually turn evocation into a giant reload. And sometimes, of course, evocation would offer this card as well. So that might actually be too good, like giving you all these spells off of evocation as a resource advantage. That's something for you guys to talk about in the comments. But beyond the world of evocation, I think this does still do some really neat things. And there's a nice risk to it as well, because it's like, man, I really want to play this zero mana spell for my Cyclone, but is it gonna mess up everything else in my hand? And I really like those situations in Hearthstone. So I wouldn't mind seeing this, although it is indeed pretty scary. Moving on here to Biding Time from Red Stake, a 0-mana priest spell. It reads, at the start of your next turn, draw a card and restore 1 health to your hero. So a very efficient card draw mechanism here. It's 0 mana, but it's delayed card draw. So you're not going to get any choices now. But if you play a couple of these over the course of a game, it could really stack up to some extra cards in your hand, and then randomly generating these off things like Shethic Veil Weavers and so on does indeed give Priest a nice little card draw engine. And I like this idea of like delaying the card draw so it's not super impactful, but making it efficient. And Priest is really light on card draw right now. It's all about card generation, and this could move that into a different direction. And you get a nice little health as well tossed in here for free. And I just like the name, really, because it's kind of what Priest is about a lot of the time. They're just sort of sitting there biding time, healing themselves, just drawing cards, accruing resources, and then finally going to make some giant move. So this really does fit into the flavor of how Priest tends to play. And I think that's really why I like this card. It's pretty simple and cute, but I think it would be pretty good for the class. Okay, so this one, let's talk about it. This one's going to cause some headaches and some discussion, I'm sure. It's called Flowing Idea from Alma Valadora. And it reads, every 3 seconds, transform into a random 0-cost spell, and then it's going to upgrade each turn. Now, in my mind, that will upgrade both the cost and the cost. In other words, the cost of playing the card and the cost of the spell that it's transforming into. So it's now 1 mana and it transforms into 1-cost spells, 2 mana transforms into 2-cost spells, etc. And it's going to change every 3 seconds. Now, we've never seen anything like this in Hearthstone before, where a card is not changing on a defined trigger state, like, an end of turn, on play, etc. This would be based on a timer. So that is a huge shift for how Hearthstone would work. And that's why I think we need to discuss this one a lot. Some of you will hate that. I totally get it. I realize there's some potential issues with this, particularly the fact that people would feel compelled to like wait out their entire turn to see if this card's going to offer them something good. So, like you don't really have a great play. You're just going to wait for this thing to cycle every 3 seconds until the end of your turn, and then be forced to make a play at the very end of the rope. That could absolutely extend game states. So, I would probably like put a cap on this, say like 5 times per turn or something, or 10 times per turn, just to ensure that it eventually resolves into a card, and you're not just sitting there waiting forever. So some mechanical challenges, but I do love the idea of using Hearthstone's purely digital format more interestingly, and I think this card delivers on that promise, because it's transforming constantly, and it's alive and it's living, which only really digital card games can do super well. So maybe it's every 5 seconds. Maybe there's a cap. Maybe it's capped by the number of times the mana cost is. So maybe it only transforms 1 time into 1 mana spells, or 3 to 3, 5 to 5, etc. We could figure out problems like that, but I just like the idea of exploring these alternate spaces for how cards could work. And it's not totally foreign. We do have time-based effects with things like Nozdormu. Admittedly, that's like widely hated, so maybe that's not something people want to see in the game. I'm not sure I do either, but I think it's worth discussing. And a card like this, even if it's not perfect in execution, it brings up some interesting thoughts, and that's why I included it here. All right, and then finally here we have Double or Nothing from Andrew Jackson, a 0-mana rogue card, and it reads, shuffle the highest cost card from your hand into your deck. And if you draw it this turn, the card you just shuffled, you will add another copy to your hand. So this is a really interesting idea, allowing you to essentially double up on your most valuable cards, theoretically, as long as you can redraw them. And do note that this is a resource negative card. It's shuffling into your deck, but you're not automatically drawing one back. It's not like you're getting a chance to draw it immediately. You have to use something else to draw the card. So when you play this, you're actually losing 2 cards from hand. That's a significant resource disadvantage. But if you can do some crazy shenanigans, right? You could do things with, say, like Lore Keeper Polkelt after playing this, and then guarantee that you're going to draw that highest cost card, thereby creating duplicates of whatever super high cost thing you really care about. It could be your Yashiraj or something. You really want 2 Yashirajas or 2 N'Zoths. You play this, you shuffle N'Zoth into your deck, you drop a Polkelt, you slam whatever card, draw card, doesn't matter. You're going to draw Yashiraj. This is going to make you a second Yashiraj in hand, and then that's 2 Yashirajas, 2 N'Zoths, 2 Yogs, whatever it may be. Maybe you got some Cthuns, you need extras, who knows. Double or Nothing could allow you to do that. It doesn't have to be that high cost. It could just be some burst damage card. You know, old school, it could have been a Leroy that was your highest cost card. You shuffle 2 Leroys in and get a bunch of Leroys. So some interesting ways to utilize this. And I like the idea that it has some real downsides because you're losing resources. If you don't guarantee it with things like Polkelt, it's not even likely to work in most cases. So there's some real failure states as well. But sometimes you may not care. You just may be excited to have a 0-mana spell and rogue, activate your combos, take that resource hit just to potentially make a big play later, or build your deck around this entirely. I think that's exactly where 0 cost cards need to live. So I'm sure there's some way to break this that I haven't noticed yet. Of course, as always, if there's something broken, let me know in the comments below. But for now, I think this is a really fun idea and a great name and flavor, of course, for Rogue as well. All right, folks. So that wraps it up here for our custom 0-mana cards. As always, I want to hear your thoughts on these. What did you hate? What did you love? What's going to be OP? Keep in mind, these are really hard design at 0 mana to still make them impactful. So be gentle on both me and the designers in this case. I thought we ended up with some pretty cool stuff despite all the challenges. That said, I know you want to submit some cards for next time around. Well, I want you to make me some hero cards. We haven't seen hero cards in forever, and I want to see some hero cards. I'm not even going to have a limit on what they can be. Any character, any flavor, any fit you want, as long as they're in the Hearthstone universe. But make me some hero cards, make them cool, and we're going to talk about them next time. Hopefully sooner than later. These custom card videos always take a while to get out. That said, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Keeps, one last time for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the link in the description to see what they're all about. But until then, thanks much for watching, and until next time, game on.